Okay, so at the time of recording this, it is 6:47 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and I have just stayed up and watched the entire third season of Cobra Kai. And I have to give some very brief, honest hot takes right here as of just barely watching this. The first thing I gotta tell you is that if you really liked season 1 and 2 of Cobra Kai, you're not going to like season 3 as much. You're just not. The second thing you're gonna have to understand is that this show has been Netflixed. I'm gonna warn you right now. The show got Netflixed. And for some of you, that might be a really positive thing. Some of you might really like it when Netflix takes over a lot of the projects that other shows start, and then they bring them into the Netflix fold, and then they start to take control of that project. Some of you may really like that. For me, that's a negative thing, and it shows in season 3 for me personally. If you're watching this show because you really, really like the new content, the new aspect that Cobra Kai brings to the series, and you weren't a big fan of the original Karate Kids, this season goes a lot heavier into the old Karate Kid movies that Daniel LaRusso is mainly in. And so if that's not something that you're into, if that's not your cup of tea, this season also is not going to be your favorite. Just a heads up before I start. And before my words get twisted and everything, I want to clarify what I mean. It's not unwatchable. It's fine. It's okay television. It's not the best. It's not the worst. But I'm talking about in comparison to what seasons 1 and 2 were, this is not a good season. But I always try to be positive, so let's start with the positive things first, and then I'll touch on some of the negatives later. Listen, the season is consistently interesting, even though you start to get some whiplash as a member of the audience because you're jumping between these two different stories and plots that, like, it's really sometimes hard to keep track of or hard to care about one as compared to the other. There is always something interesting going on, and so you do want to watch it very closely to make sure that you don't lose track of where you are in terms of the story. And just as a side note on that, the final episode is actually not that bad compared to what it could have been. And the entire season itself, you realize, is basically Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. It's basically what it is. It's setting up Part 2. It's Avengers Infinity War for Avengers Endgame. This entire season is simply designed to set up the next and hopefully the last season. The next really good thing about the show is that Johnny is still Johnny. And so if you really appreciated his humor, if you appreciated his character in the first two seasons, you're gonna like him this season. Maybe not as much as previous seasons because Netflix seems to, like I said earlier, have Netflixed his character. However, he's still entertaining, he's still fun to watch, and if you found his character something that drew you into the story, then you're gonna enjoy Johnny. Johnny's always gonna be funny. And the third good thing that I found was that Netflix did not sandbag season 3 as much as I thought they were going to. I've watched Netflix adapt TV shows from books or from other networks before, and while in the beginning it wasn't the worst thing in the world when Netflix would do it, it's now become synonymous with television death. Netflix lately has not produced a lot of quality content when it comes to TV shows or movies that they adapt from other places. It's something Netflix is not very good at, especially recently. Netflix is very, very good at creating originals that we all want to watch. But in terms of co-opting other people's stories, other people's ideas, and then having to work with them themselves, Netflix isn't very good at that, and Netflix probably never will be very good with that. However, as a member of the audience and someone who binged Cobra Kai as much as possible when they first found out about it, I am grateful that they didn't give it the full Netflix treatment and just butcher it to pieces when it came to their platform. Let's go to the bad. So the first negative thing is that this is a Johnny and a Daniel season. And so if you were curious as to what happens to Robbie, how it is that this affects Samantha, how it is that Miguel recovers from all of this stuff, you're going to get little bits and pieces, but you're not going to have someone following them constantly in the same way that they follow Johnny and Daniel. It's going to follow their journeys for most of the season. And honestly, while it's a good thing because they're entertaining to watch, you're left kind of in the dark as to the other aspects of the story. Specifically Miguel. Miguel and Robbie especially. Robbie's in prison for assault that leads to someone being temporarily paralyzed, and he's there for like 20 minutes, it feels like, throughout the course of the show. Miguel ends up learning how to walk, and it's like he's Jesus on water. It's mind blowing, it's baffling, and it makes everything feel unreal. And it's something that you're like, well, honestly, at this point, It's a Netflix show, why do I care? There are also quite a few conspicuous absences of actors and actresses within season 3. Specifically, Aisha is a really big one. She's just gone, vanished from the face of the earth. And the reason that the actual writers and creators of the show gave for as to why they took her out of the story, it's pretty weird. Basically, it came down to them saying, hey, there's nowhere else that we can take the story, which is kind of writing 101. You don't write yourself into a corner. You should know where it is that this is going to go before you actually try it. And it's kind of weird that they did that. Like, to each their own, but I thought that there was things they could do with the character, and I think you also eliminate an entire avenue of exploring Samantha LaRusso as a character, because the entire season she's mostly just whiny. She's either attached to Robbie Keane or Miguel Diaz, or she's scared and hiding from Tori under a desk somewhere. That's pretty much her entire character in season 3, and so taking out Aisha, actually, I feel like, really limits her as a character. Also, on top of that, we're missing about half of Anthony LaRusso, Samantha's little brother, in this. Like, seriously, he dropped probably 80 pounds. I'm obviously exaggerating, but man, he dropped some serious weight in a really short amount of time. The other negative thing that I'm going to point out, at least for season 3 in my opinion, is that this season's not very funny. The one-liners are super corny. In fact, they're almost awkward because they're so forced. There's an agenda behind the show, which is fine. I've talked about agendas before. It's okay so long as you're not hitting people over the head with a 2x4 with it. You can subtly do an agenda and have it work in your story. But man, they are cramming a very specific agenda, a very specific worldview, and they are hitting you over the head with that thing. And it's so aggravating. It's like your uncle at Thanksgiving who says something super colorful that you wouldn't say in other people's company. That's what it feels like. It's so off-putting and weird that they say things like they do in the series that it almost makes you feel physically uncomfortable watching the show. And like I said, it's a completely different thing when you see people like, Johnny Lawrence do things like this, because you expect it from them and they're taking it in stride. They're moving. This is their character, and that's what makes it funny, is because it's so weird. But having Johnny Lawrence say something and then pausing for 4 seconds to make it uncomfortable for everyone involved seems like a really weird way, for me personally, to generate humor. Another negative point that I wanted to touch on real quick, season 3's fight scenes are not good. Like, objectively, they're not very good. Part of this is just laziness on the part of the people who actually produce the product, because there are a lot of things that you watch and you're like, wow, this looks super fake. You're really watching all of these fights go down and you're thinking, no, I'm watching him. This is a whole routine and it looks like a bunch of kids play fighting. And you can tell it's not real, and it really takes you out of the action. It really makes you kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. Just makes you feel uninvolved with what's going on. And it doesn't inherently make it boring, but you're watching it and you're like, well, no, that was a fake punch. Well, no, that was a fake kick. No, he's not even close to his face. Things like that, they're just not very professionally done. And then on top of that, Netflix tends to try and do this with a lot of their shows, where they just take things and they're at like a 4 to a 6 somewhere, and Netflix decides, you know what? We need to actually take this up to a 1.9 million, and we're just going to blast this thing through the roof and make it totally unbelievable and unrealistic, and just really sandbag some of the expectations going into the next season. For example, in season 1, the big ultimate fight that they have at the end is the All Valley tournament, which is extremely realistic. That's where they're supposed to fight. And at the end of season 2, while it's a lot less realistic to see a fight of that magnitude at a high school, you see high schoolers get into fights in high school. And so it makes sense that they would get into a big brawl, one with the other, if there were no teachers present. That makes some sense to me. Obviously, it's crazy how widespread it gets without teachers getting involved, but okay, I can suspend my disbelief for a high school brawl. Okay, I can do that one. When you have all of the Cobra Kai members jumping Daniel LaRusso's house with both of the different dojos in there, that's a big surprise attack, and they start beating the crap out of each other and like pounding bloody faces into walls and breaking glass tables and things like that. I'm sorry, in this show, they're in high school. They're not organizing an entire gang and then establishing a non-lethal weapon hit and run where they go and do drive-by karate and then they run out of the house. That's weird. That's not something that happens. And so the final battle, you're watching it and you're like, okay, this is happening, I guess, but it doesn't feel very real to you because it's so ridiculous and so out of place that you don't really get attached to it. You're not really attached to any of the consequences. You just kind of watch it as a passive observer, being like, oh, this is on television. And real quick, before I talk about the last thing, I just want to make sure that people understand, again, I'm not saying that this show is unwatchable. The show, honestly, is fine. It's that compared to what we've seen before, this is definitely a step down when it came to Netflix. Samantha really, in terms of character development, the only character development that she has at all is, I need to stop being scared of Tori. That's the whole thing. And basically, she learns to control her breathing, and that's how it is that she gets past it. And it's really shallow. There's nothing else that happens on her part. Tori doesn't even get any character development. You just find out that, hey, yes, she's a dirtbag, but now there's kind of a reason that she's a dirtbag, but it's still not a very good reason to be a dirtbag to everybody. And great, now we just got a dirtbag that also has a mom that's dying. That's not character development. That's throwing in random reasons as to why she's a jerk. Same thing with Robbie. Robbie kind of just starts on the streets, and then he goes to prison, and then he gets out of prison, and he's angry at both Danny and Johnny. And that's the whole plot surrounding Robbie Keane, and it's really disappointing. What you're currently watching is footage of me actually physically watching the show. This was my facial expression. I recorded myself watching an entire 2 episodes of the show. And look at me real quick. Does it look like I enjoyed watching it? Does it look like I enjoyed what I was watching? No, it looks like I'm watching it and super confused and actually kind of aggravated that I even have to watch it. Once again, I was almost peeing. I was in stitches when I was watching the first 2 seasons of Cobra Kai. I thought they were hilarious. This season, it's honestly probably one of the most disappointing things ever to find out that this season 3, this coveted season 3 is coming out, and then to just have them lay a direct egg like that. That's probably the most disappointing thing. It's not really that the show is just awful. It's that it's not up to the standard that you used to, and that's really sad. But anyways, those are pretty much my thoughts on it. The show itself is fine. It's going to be a step down from what you're used to. If you're okay with watching something a step down from what you're used to, you'll be okay with the show. It's just not going to be your favorite. If it is your favorite, you've probably never seen a TV show or a movie before, and you probably shouldn't give anybody any advice as to what they should watch ever. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you really enjoyed the content, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more, and let me know what it is that you want to see in the future. Talk to you later. Bye.